Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Crop. I'm Anna Heslop and today I'm talking to FAR's Abie Horrocks about managing, maintaining and building soil quality. Abie's just authored a new FAR focus called Good Soil is Good Business. Abie, tell us about the book.
Yes, thanks, Anna. So the book, the timing felt really right for a guide like this. In lots of ways, cropping soils are a bit different from pastoral soils, and this is because the diversity around the rotations, there's depletive and restorative crops and phases, for example. And so although there is a lot of information out there, it's not all relevant to cropping. So we wanted to pull together what was relevant to cropping, and there's a whole raft of drivers for the time being right now. One of them is around financial. I think it's fair to say that there's a bit of a cap on innovations around yield and productivity increases. And we've seen a lot of that in the last decade or so. So now more than ever, things like soil health and soil quality can really make a big difference around the financials of a system. And there's a lot of information out there to really point in that direction around how increasing your soil quality can increase your yields and the profitability associated with that. Two examples of that. One is from some Southland work where there was some correlations done between yields and soil quality using aggregate stability as the indicator. So every time that reduced by 10%, there was an 8% reduction in yields. And if you crunch the numbers around that in today's harvests, that could look like around $500 per hectare with a 10% reduction in that particular indicator. So the point being now more than ever, there is some real financial drivers to be thinking really hard about soil quality and the cropping system.
I'm going to jump in here because what is soil quality? Is there a single definition, and is soil quality the same for every soil and for every farm system?
Yes, good question. No and no. Just like there is no single recipe, if you like, to improve soil quality, neither is there a single definition. And the guide that we've put out is really the point isn't to be prescriptive. There's a whole suite of tools out there that have a place in cropping systems, and it's just really pulling it together so different farms can think about what would work for them. Soil quality is, rather than having a single definition, it's thinking more about a soil's capability to function for a particular land use within inherent properties. And by inherent properties, I'm just referring to those things that you can't control. So your soil texture, which comes about from the parent material and how it weathered over time. And so the composition of silt, sand, and clay, for example, is part of that inherent properties of your soil, gives it characteristics which the guide touches on, because understanding that and how you manage that is important. But really it focuses more on those things that are in your control that can really help improve that soil quality.
So your soil quality is based on the type of soil you've got, whether it's a silty or loamy or clay soil. It is what it is, and the soil quality refers to how well it's performing for what you want it to do.
That's right, and there's a whole raft of indicators that can be measured to be indicative of where your soil quality is sitting, and that these are biological, physical and chemical, and there's no single one indicator which is going to give you that perfect answer. It's just, again, thinking about which indicators you want to use on your farm to give you a sense of where your soil quality is at, using there's a number of different indicators out there that can help, and the guide touches on those as well.
So there's information in there about doing a bit of a soil stock take.
That's right, because it's important to know where it's at, and it fluctuates across the rotation. There's, as I said before, there's periods of restoration across a rotation, and there's depleted phases. So getting your eye in with how they affect your soil quality and how management can tweak that to try and keep that heading in the right direction, bearing in mind that it does fluctuate. There's the simplest way to do that is with visual assessments. Sending samples off to measure organic matter and carbon, that's very helpful as well. But just doing a visual assessment is really accessible option to assess where your soil quality is at. And this is because you can see what's happening. Get out there with a spade. For example, a soil that's really compacted and hasn't got a lot of that soil organic matter and the soil quality has been compromised. You can see what compaction looks like in the way that the roots get down through the soil profile compared to, say, a soil which has had come out of more of a restorative phase, and you can actually visually see that the structure and the aggregation, so the roots can get down to get the moisture, air, and nutrients that they need to get those yields that you're chasing. So a bit of guidance around how to do those visual assessments is part of what's in the guides. But that's just one way to get a benchmark on your soil quality.
So there's a lot of talk about soil quality when it comes to social license to farm, about good management practice, about runoff, about everything under the sun seems to come down to soil quality. So it can be quite a scary thing. But in your book, you're talking about 6 different approaches that people could use or choose between to maintain or potentially improve soil quality on their farm, whatever soil they start with.
Yes, but just first to comment on what you were saying around the what's happening in the regulatory space and it seeming overwhelming. It is really true that when you're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions or nitrate leaching or runoff, or a lot of these really poignant issues that we're facing in the environmental space with agriculture, soil quality can mitigate each and every one of them for a whole raft of reasons. So you're ticking a lot of boxes by just putting a bit more effort and concentration into thinking about how that's tracking. And there's, and not to mention resilience. It's a biggie around more extreme weather events, climate change, improving that soil quality can really add to the resilience of a system. So back to the other part of your question around those 6 principles. There's probably more than 6, but we've sort of narrowed it down to 6 principles, which are nationally, internationally considered to be really good principles around soil quality, things that you can do on farm to build that and maintain it. And we just pulled in those ones that we thought are relevant to cropping and that have the science to support them. So that they range from things like just avoiding having bare soil, thinking about the importance of minimising those fallow periods. And a key driver for that is wanting to have those below ground returns of organic matter.
What does that actually mean?
The booklet dives into some detail around the importance of soil organic matter and carbon, because when you're talking about soil quality, they go hand in hand, and thinking about what this means in terms of targets, what this means in terms of how it fluctuates across the rotation. Those organic matter returns, particularly from the roots of your crops. Residue is important too, but roots actually return a lot more organic matter to the soil system than those above ground returns. So thinking, and another principle is really focusing on how to increase those below ground returns. And the reason why that organic matter and carbon is so important is because it can create that structure that you need to have good soil quality. It provides nutrients for the microbial diversity, and that it also gives a foundation and that structure to retain nutrients, to retain moisture, all those things that you need for productivity and yield. So thinking, and not all crops in the rotation are equal in terms of those below ground returns. So thinking about having a balance across the rotation is really key.
Okay, so that's 2.
That's 2.
Avoiding bare soil and maximising below ground returns of organic matter.
Yes. So
what's next?
And another one is around minimising disturbance. Again, there's no one size fits all. reducing tillage is part of that narrative. It doesn't necessarily increase the amount of carbon. It's more of a systems approach is important. Reducing your tillage, thinking about those crops that you're adding, can actually lead to increases in carbon in cropping systems. So that is achievable, but tillage on its own isn't the single bullet, if you like. But what it does do is it redistributes that soil organic matter carbon down the profile. So when you reduce your tillage or have a no-till system, you do have more soil organic matter at the top part of the profile where the roots need it the most. And a good example of that is results from our Chertsey establishment trial this year. In the dryland blocks, we had significantly greater yields with no-till compared to the inversion tillage. And this really speaks to resilience. This was because we also measured greater volumetric water holding capacity in those no-till systems, which basically meant when that system was a bit under pressure, like it was in the dryland system, we didn't see this result in the irrigated blocks. We could also measure improvements in yield. So it does speak to the resilience of a system. So thinking about opportunities across the rotation to reduce tillage, reduce disturbance is part of the package.
Okay, and animals come in here somewhere?
Yes, one of the principles is around integrating livestock and cropping. Again, no one size fits all, but where they fit, there's a whole raft of reasons why that can really contribute to not just soil quality, but thinking about weed management, residue management, and what have you, cash flow. But from the soil quality perspective, having those more perennial crops in the rotation or phases where there's less disturbance means that those perennial crops have such fibrous, dense root systems. They are really effective at returning that below ground organic matter, and you see pretty quickly your soils will restore their stability and functionality after, for example, a pastoral phase. Without livestock, there's other ways to do that. So it's not the only approach, but it does have that positive correlation.
Okay, so that's 5. Must be one left.
There's one left, 2 left. Another one is around thinking about increasing nutrient supply through biological activity. And so this really touches on thinking about, yes, we know that the micro, macro organisms are doing so much in terms of providing nutrients, making them available, very tied into a lot of those nutritional cycling functions that are key for production. So thinking about how to get that soil structure in particular into a position where the micro and macro organisms can be functioning at their best and providing as much as they can to the cycling of those nutrients. So anything that you can do to reduce compaction, for example, is going to support that nutrient supply from those biological means. They need, like roots, they need moisture, they need water, they need nutrients. So a soil that is really compact is really compromising that function. So it's all tied in and with that nutrient cycling. I feel like there's one more principle of biodiversity, increasing diversity on farm is another one of the principles. And this really points to thinking about balancing the different depletive and restorative phases across the rotation. New Zealand has some of the most diverse rotations in the world, which is why New Zealand cropping soils are actually have better quality than a lot of cropping soils overseas. Inherent properties are part of that, but management and the diversity across our rotations is also a player in how and where we're sitting in the international scene with the state of our soils here in New Zealand. So that's another one of the principles that gets dived into a bit in thinking about some of the actions that can be taken.
So I'm just going to whiz through those quickly, and because I'm not an expert, I've actually got them written down here. So 6 internationally recognised options for improving soil quality include avoiding bare soil, maximising below ground returns of organic matter, minimising disturbance, doesn't mean you have to go no-till, but minimising disturbance, integrating livestock and cropping, increasing plant biodiversity across and within the rotation, and increasing soil fertility by biological means.
Yes.
So 2 comments there. One, they sound very, very similar to what we hear regen ag people talking about. And two, it sounds very much like a pretty typical arable system. So tell me about that.
I think both those comments are true. The principles are universal. They apply to whatever approach you're taking. They're just universal principles to build your soil quality. And I don't think any regenerative agricultural practitioner would argue with that. I think there might be some points of difference around the degree of exploration within some of those principles. One example that comes to mind is around the biodiversity across within a rotation. They might be exploring more options. A regenerative agricultural practitioner might be exploring more options around multi-species cover crops, for example, or looking at options to intercrop so that there's diversity within the rotation to build on some synergies around some of the functionality there. There might be some issues with that. And if you have seed crops in your rotation, contamination is important to consider. But I think maybe the extent to where things are going under those principles, there might be some differences. But yeah, in terms of the foundational principles, there is not a lot of difference, in my opinion. Second part of your question, a lot of cropping farmers are doing many of these things anyhow. So this guide isn't intended to be some big revolutionary, here's something brand new. It's really just compiling a lot of what cropping farmers are doing anyhow, providing some guidance around some things that perhaps they hadn't thought of, or even just understanding some of the principles around why what they're doing makes a difference to that soil quality, I think is really of interest. So nothing brand new and revolutionary, but still really important stuff to pull together and think about in context.
And they can pick and choose between those things what works for their system.
Absolutely. Not prescriptive by any stretch of the imagination. It's smorgasbord of options out there.
Smorgasbord of options. Okay, well, thanks, Abie. The book is fantastic, and I think what you just said is right. It summarises a lot of stuff that's been some a little bit newer than others, but it brings it all into perspective and makes it really, really clear what soil quality is and isn't, and what you can do about soil on your farm. And I think that one of the messages I got from it is that arable farmers are doing really well. So if you want to know how to maintain, manage and build soil quality on your farm, I recommend you have a look at the FAR Focus, Good Soil is Good Business. And in the meantime, have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.